Being JP2 Day today, I thought it was appropriate to read a phrase of his in which he wrote, which I think summarizes one of the great gifts that St. John Paul the Great gave us, which is clarity in human sexuality, clarity in the truth, and clarity in a deep recognition that our identity is its fullness in Jesus Christ, with Jesus Christ, and through Jesus Christ. And so he says this, John Paul II, man cannot live without love. He remains a being that is incomprehensible for himself. His life is senseless if love is not revealed to him. If he does not encounter love, he does not experience it and make it his own. If he does not participate intimately in it, that is why Christ the Redeemer fully reveals man to himself. And so that last phrase is what captures it all. That is why Christ the Redeemer fully reveals man to himself. In other words, Jesus Christ is our teacher. He is the light. In fact, JP2 would write a whole encyclical called Veritatis Splendor, in which he would go through meticulously how the light of truth comes forth from Jesus Christ into humanity to redeem humanity, to reveal humanity, to refresh humanity, ultimately to love humanity. But it's obvious all of us live with these deep pangs of love and desires that go beyond what God has revealed to us in terms of how to use it in accordance with his right rule. And so the confusion that happens in all of us as we grow up, as we hit different stages of our life, is obviously always there. But what the church never should do, which the church can't do, is deny Jesus Christ and his truth, that it is he who reveals to us how to be human because he became human and showed us the path of truth. And so the confusion that we experienced yesterday with the blow-up of a video that's, I think, coming out today, it's so ironic, the timing of it, and it's hard not to think that it wasn't planned. That we were last night in the vigil of the dedication and of the celebration of one of the great popes of all time in St. John Paul the Great, whose masterpiece, one of his legacies, one of the greatest gifts that he gave us was theology of the body. And so it's so ironic how it just has spontaneously combusted our church, which has stood from the time of the very first book of the Bible until seemingly yesterday on the basic pillar that what has God revealed to us about human sexuality from the very beginning in the garden was that human sexuality is to be used under the covenant bond of that intimacy of marriage. In the misuse of our sexuality out of the intimacy of the covenant bond of marriage is what truly alienates us from God, from each other, and from the true love that God has revealed to us through Jesus Christ. And boy, how the news loves to take anything it can to spark a controversy. And definitely, there is no doubt that our Holy Father loves to give in to that. He loves to create this kind of controversy, to put in these different thoughts here and there. And if you look at the context for this video that's coming out, the context for this phrase that's been thrown around the world as if the church, after all these years and biblically tradition, all this stuff is now changing its teaching on marriage, and that we're going to allow almost seemingly, it seems like we're getting to the point where like the sacrament of marriage is now going to be allowed between two people of the same sex. That's not true. And when you look deeper into the context for this conversation that the Pope was having was a Mexican reporter. And the two of them were in a conversation in 2019. And she started to double down on his famous phrase, who am I to judge? And she goes, of course, when you said that on the airplane, who am I to judge? You had said before that you still believe in the catechism and the teaching of the church. And so then the phrase that got fired around yesterday, was about this cloudiness of civil unions. And in that same interview in Spanish, he says that obviously, if a mom or a dad has a child who has homosexual tendencies, they shouldn't kick them out of their homes and out of their families. Well, isn't that the truth? We should always love our children. We should always love everybody the way Jesus Christ did. So it's the taking of these things that both in its context seem to be very nice and pastoral, but yet rarely get clarified to give the truth, that get mixed into this whole entire world that we now live in which social media and different hierarchical figures are coming into. But it's so important to realize that Jesus Christ reveals the truth of our humanity, of our sexuality, and of love. And it's to go to him in the Eucharist. It's to go to him in Scripture. It's to go to him through our tradition, which he teaches endlessly throughout the whole entire tradition of our church. What is so incredible is that my family, we were blessed to be able to meet St. John Paul II for the anniversary of my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary. It was the same year that St. John Paul II was celebrating the 50th anniversary of his priesthood. And in that anniversary, it was amazing. My grandparents brought him this chalice, which unfortunately I don't have it today, but it's this chalice. They gave it to him to consecrate so that it could be used in our family when we have celebrations like weddings and anniversaries and baptisms and masses, all these different things. And so he consecrates this chalice. And my grandmother gave it to him, and as he received this chalice, and later on he'd go celebrate the Mass with it, he looked at the family and he said, "Are these your children and grandchildren?" And my grandparents have 13 kids, and at that time, probably about 50 or 60 grandchildren. Now there's 84 grandchildren and over 155 great-grandchildren. And he looked surprised. He looked surprised, and then he doubled down. He said, "Isn't this an American family?" As if he knew that one of the biggest challenges we have in our American culture is contraception. And he knew that contraception, just as it was stated so clearly in Humanae Vitae, and for so many years within Catholic tradition, that human sexuality that would block the gift of God's life in that intimacy of the marital embrace was one of the key components of a destruction of a culture that would lead to what Paul VI perfectly predicted in Humanae Vitae, to a culture of death. And one of the fruits of that is abortion. The other fruit of that is pornography. He knew that. JP2 knew that. And when he saw this family, he's like, wait, what is going on here? This is what I've always heard. But look, it's not true. There are families that actually believe in the gospel of life, in the gospel of love, in the truth that is truly coming through the heart of Jesus Christ to our married couples. And today, John Paul II Day, we need to stand for that truth. We need to embrace that truth. We need to courageously defend that truth against a culture that wants to destroy marriage, destroy life, and destroy the authenticity of a relationship with God. And so as he walked through this incredible moment with our family, he went to each of us and he gave us all rosaries. And as he came to my one aunt, and as you can imagine, my grandparents had nine girls, praise God. And so he got to one of my aunts, my Aunt Carol, and she was pregnant. And so, it's this typical thing. He was given rosaries, and to her he gave 2 rosaries, and he walked along. And then all of a sudden he stopped and he came back and he gave her a 3rd rosary. Now, maybe my aunt was thinking, oh, I'm special. I got 2 rosaries here, because 1 for my baby and 2 for me. Wouldn't you know, a week or 2 later, she would go to the doctors and find out she's having twins. When we cooperate with God's life, we get a double portion of God's love. When we cooperate faithfully with the truth of our church, with our dear Blessed Mother Mary, with the sacraments, despite the fact that all of us have cravings that seemingly go against what Jesus reveals to us. We all have confused ways of seeing our bodies and sexuality. We can have attractions that can go one way or the other. But deep down, we need that pinnacle of truth, that beacon, in which reveals to us not to say, yeah, just stay in that immorality, just stay in that lifestyle, just stay, and now let's institutionalize it with civic laws. But actually, what Jesus Christ came to do was abolish that slavery. And as Galatians 5 would say, St. Paul would write, it's for freedom that Christ set us free. And what is that freedom that Christ is freeing us from? From sin, from the devil, from the total destruction of our lives. And so what JP2 did for me, and which I hope today he can do for all of us today, is be that smile, that love of Jesus, that embrace of somebody who was a representative of Jesus Christ, a true vicar of Christ, a true beacon of light in a world of confusion. It's interesting, that little rosary that got passed to one of my little nephews. My Aunt Carol ended up having two, a girl and a boy, Redora and Jack, which are properly named after my grandparents, Redora and Jack. Jack called the other day, and he's getting married to a beautiful woman. He's studying at Benedictine College. And so the JP2 effect, even perhaps he didn't remember that encounter from the womb with this saint, continues in the dignity of human life, which begins at conception, continues to allow itself to be endowed with the great gift of the splendor of truth. It's as if our culture and some of its leaders, even our church hierarchy, are stuck on this boat of confusion and this waves. There's that story, right, of this admiral. He's on this huge ship, one of the biggest ships in the ocean, and he sees ahead of himself this light. And so he calls to this light with his radio, and he says, "This is Admiral whatever. Move from your trajectory. We are the biggest ship in the sea, so move." And the light shoots back, basically saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, we can't." So the admiral gets on there even more forceful and say, "That light, please get out of the way. We are the biggest ship in the earth. We are going to just knock you over if you do not move." And the little light says, "I'm so sorry, but we can't." And so finally, Admiral, "I hereby declare you to move. If not, we are going to crush you." And the light just kind of goes back and says, "I'm so sorry, but we are a mere beacon of light on a little island that just seemingly peering out to just let you know that we're just a little lighthouse. So you better move." Sometimes it feels that the gospel, that immovable truth, is seemingly on a collision course with these ships of untruthfulness, but it's that beacon of the lighthouse of Christ, his church, his revelation, his sacraments, his saints, that continue to shine that light in the fogginess and in the distraction. And yes, these boats can choke up again, they can just crash up against it, but the land, the rock of Peter, endowed by the presence of Jesus Christ, will always prevail over the clumsiness, over the craziness, over the confusion of the gates that seemingly try to crash in front of it, the boats, the ships that seemingly come against it. And so on this great day in which we celebrate the feast of St. John Paul II, St. John Paul the Great, let us embrace that great truth of Jesus' revelation to us, of his light of truth, of the beacon of hope that he brings to us in the depths of the faith, that he is the source of our salvation.